listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the NFL free agency and draft preview for March 27th, 2020. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
All right, folks, always good to commiserate. He's the wordsmith, so I figured I'd throw a big word in there. Brian Blessing with our pal Bruce Marshall from the legendary publication The Gold Sheet. And we're going to talk about the NFL a little bit here, and specifically numbers that have surfaced for the NFL draft. So we'll get to that. But Bruce, again, we're heading to another weekend without sports and all kinds of discussion about when things may return, at least sports returns. Let's just start there. And one of the things that came out last night is something that we've actually been discussing, that the NBA, and I would think the NHL could certainly follow suit, would be to find a region, an area where COVID-19 has calmed down and travel is going to be the big issue moving forward for us, and bring all the players to one locale, stage the games in one spot to try to get the regular season and the playoffs completed. In the NBA, it was low-hanging fruit for them. One of the places we said that made complete sense would be Vegas, with hotels where occupancy is next to nothing at the moment, that they've already rented out the Thomas and Mack and the Cox Pavilion for their annual NFL or NBA Summer League, and they could basically just, bam, right there with those two facilities, complete their season playing a boatload of games each and every day. That story has come out that it's under very serious discussion by the NBA, and it seems to me, something we've talked about for a couple of weeks, is a very logical approach to the situation and maybe viable.
Yeah, and it's very much okay to talk about how this is going to look like on the other side. I mean, if anything, that talk's been a bit lagging, but it's picked up some this week. I think that was one of the reasons the stock market jumped up the last 3 days. You can talk about this stuff. It's extremely, extremely important. We can talk about two things at one time. I know we know what's going on. Listen, it's hit my family too. My wife's family, she's got some relatives in Spain who are in the hospital with this thing.
Oh, boy.
So, I mean, we know what's going on with that, but we can talk about what it's going to look like on the other side. Everybody would like to talk about that. So there's no controversy, no matter what they're saying on TV. People want to talk about that. Mark Cuban said something very interesting the other day, I thought, on top of this possibility of Vegas being a venue. He came right out on one of the interviews and said, look, we're going to play in the NBA. And no hesitation, even playing without fans. He said people want this entertainment. People need something to look forward to, and I think we can give it to them, and it doesn't matter if there's no fans in the stands. That was important. Remember here, all this stuff, no matter what's coming out of Washington, it's the governors and the mayors, especially the governors, who are the ones pulling the levers here in certain states. And like you say, Brian, they're not going to be able – and certain states are different. Andrew Cuomo's got different things to worry about in New York than Kristi Noem does in South Dakota. So, I mean, you're not going to get an all clear everywhere to start. Even this thing is going to unravel differently and in different speeds in different spots. But the fact they're willing to do it without fans in the stands makes it possible they would, and that they should go to a place where they could probably play. Now, whether fans show up or not, that's to be determined. But they would, as far as Cuban has said, they don't need that. They could play these games without fans there. So whatever. If Steve Sisolak's okay with them playing, the governor of Nevada, okay with them playing there, whether or not he relaxes the social distancing and the crowd thing, wouldn't matter as much, because they'll still it sounds like they would still play. I would think the NHL would probably do the same thing. Looking down the road, I mean, this is still, believe me, they're talking about this in the NFL too, because like we said, this stuff is going to unravel differently in different spots, and getting crowds together. We'll see. New York. Though remember, the Jets and Giants play in New Jersey. They don't play in New York, so Andrew Cuomo won't decide that. But New Jersey and New York are going to be in concert with however they decide for sure. But at least as far as the NBA goes and the NHL, it could work in a venue like Vegas. Baseball may have something else in mind. Maybe back to the spring training sites, possibly, if they want to do something like that. If those venues open up. But yeah, there's some movement there, and I think we can expect something in later spring maybe to happen.
Cuban very much will give his opinion, and he's right in most of those instances. And the one thing I would say, whether he broaches that subject or not, Bruce, I mean, you don't have to be Einstein. Sports, when it returns, is coming back without fans. I mean, we've been saying that from day one. And I would think the very best case scenario, and I would still deem it highly unlikely, but I think the best case scenario for the first time you see fans again could be the football season, the NFL. And I think that's very much up in the air. But sports to return and at least get back into the rhythm of maintaining integrity in calendar years for all these leagues, it's sports without fans. When fans return, who knows? First things first, let's get the games back.
Yes, and for that, and baseball will be thinking about the same things. And although in that case, then you think about, what's it looking like in Arizona at that point? Could they revive the season and all the spring training spots there and put those games on TV as well? Yeah, but I think that's probably going to be the way it goes. The NBA though, they'll want to make sure that the players are cured, because there's some players in the NBA and in hockey that have ended up coming down with this. So we're still a little bit a ways from that, but I think they're going to have to decide to play without fans present. But the fact they seem to be willing to do that, at least in the NBA, and I think the NHL will do the same thing, that's sort of good news, I think.
Now, the one thing we know that's going to take place, and Roger Goodell is just in no way, shape, or form budging off of this. And honestly, I think, in this instance, to get a playing field, I think he's doing the right thing. Some GMs wanted to move the draft back for various reasons, and Goodell says he'll have none of it, to the point where he's even telling the GMs and saying, he's putting the foot down, saying, public discussion about this, don't even muddy the waters. This is what we're doing. We're doing it. It's not open to discussion. The draft will move forward on April 23rd. And it's been the free agency period's been fun to talk about. And the next big fish out there is the NFL draft. Numbers have started to surface, and we can dive into some of the numbers for the first round of the draft and things that people can try to attack and handicap. But it is amazing, Bruce, that the NFL draft has turned into such a major event, but it has massive impact. And as we've alluded to, I think over the years, in recent years, is a much different animal in that, go back 25 years, any guy that made your team fourth or fifth round or lower, that was like a diamond in the rough. The top 3 rounds, those guys were guaranteed to make the team because the GM would lose his job if the 3rd round pick didn't make the team. But beyond that, 5th, 6th, 7th round guys make teams, have impacts, and in this era, even undrafted players make rosters and have impacts. So the draft has always been big. I think it's even bigger today because teams can turn things around quickly.
Yeah, and since they reduced the draft to 7 rounds, I mean, you have, there's not as many chances to get it right. So you want to get it right. Then it turns into, the free agents show up. Hey, listen, in the last, 2 years ago, Philip Lindsay was a free agent coming out of Colorado, that the running back taken by the Broncos as a free agent. He's been 1,000-yard rusher each of the last 2 years. So you can find guys like that, more so now than in the days they were drafting 12 rounds or 17 rounds, back to what we remember back right after the merger. So, yeah, you make these picks count, and you've only got 7 rounds to do it. And some teams maneuver this stuff a lot better than others, some loading up on picks. We'll get more into that as we get into April. Who's got the picks, and we'll start seeing a few more trades perhaps. But, we're awfully glad they're doing it. Listen, 98% of the people want to see this. There's whatever a few naysayers say in the news. That's Roger Goodell knows that's not what is really in the hearts of the football fans in the nation. They want to see something, so that's why we're going to have the draft.
All right, and obviously it's a quarterback league, and quarterbacks, and some teams will reach, go bonkers to try to get the quarterback they desperately want. And in many instances, what happens in a draft like this year is like, well, what's the quarterback class going to be next year? So much goes into it, to the point we're seeing numbers that it was over under 4.5 quarterbacks taken in the first round. And the kid that really, we had seen this number actually at 3.5 a while back. Now it's 4.5, and it's under 525, minus 525. Over 4.5 would be a nice return on your investment, like plus 365. But it's the kid Love out of Utah State that has really started to make some noise. And with the success that a guy like Patrick Mahomes has had recently, he's that kind of quarterback. You know, who knows how good he turns out to be, but he's been the polarizing one for us to look at this number.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes some of these teams, all it takes is one to really super value a guy and move up or draft a guy much sooner. I mean, a lot of people were surprised that Daniel Jones went so early last year, but the Giants loved him, so they picked him early. And that might be the same case with Love. He's not going to go as high as Jones. A couple of things about Love. He was into last year. Last year, the Manning Passing Academy, where they invite all the returning quarterbacks in college football in the summer, he apparently got the highest grade. He was the star of the Manning Passing Academy last summer before last season. He did not have a great season last year at Utah State. They switched coaches, and it was kind of a disappointment. He does seem to be the buzz guy now coming out of Indianapolis. And these off-season works for these guys. But my initial reaction is this is the media overreacting a bit, that all of a sudden Love is the guy. You know, he, like I said, he tailed off last year, didn't have a great season. His team undershot last year. So he's the swing vote here. Beyond him, you know, you start talking about Jacob Eason or Fromm if you want to get over 4. I'm not even sure they're going to get to 4. He'd be the 4th. But Love seems to be the buzz guy out there. But we see this a lot in leading up to the draft where the football media goes crazy over any quarterback who might get picked early. Love might be that guy they're overreacting to this year, or maybe not. We'll see.
All right, running backs, Bruce. It's a total different era in this regard. Over under 1.5 running backs selected in the first round, and it's under 1.5 is minus $5. Now you have the clear cut 2 top running backs. You get Swift out of Georgia and J.K. Dobbins from Ohio State. It's funny, Bruce. I'm not saying they aren't really important players, but boy, GMs just realize, you know, running backs, you can do a lot of good things with a decent running back, and you're hard-pressed unless they believe it's a truly great player. Just the position itself has been devalued's a bad word, but you know what I'm saying, that in terms of investing a first-round pick in a running back, someone's going to hit a home run with a guy like J.K. Dobbins in the second round, I believe.
Yeah, and this there doesn't. Now, running backs can still be, tilt the field. I mean, we saw what Derrick Henry did last year for Tennessee. They could still be very valuable. It's just, I think the quality of the guys coming out too. I've seen some mock drafts, Brian, coming up for next month that don't have any running backs taken in the first round.
I believe that.
Yeah, I mean, Swift is there, Dobbins, Edwards-Helaire out of LSU. A couple mocks I've seen with him going really late. Some have Dobbins in the second round. Swift seems to be the one who would probably go earlier. There's Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin and Akers out of Florida State, second, third round perhaps. But yeah, I mean, I think it'd be interesting even into the second round. I mean, how many guys would be picked there? You could see that 1.5, 2 number being, good for the first 2 rounds almost, based on some of these things I'm seeing. But you're right. It's partly because how the game has evolved, but also because of this class of running backs. There just doesn't look to be, there's certainly no Derrick Henry in this bunch that we can see.
All right, well, here's a position where it's just loaded to the point, and I don't know that it's hype, but they are saying the potential for wide receivers in this draft for it to be historic in nature, because wide receivers, another position in past years, it was buyer beware. A great college wide receiver doesn't necessarily mean he's going to transition and be a great NFL wide receiver. It is also a position that is ripe with, the diva nature of the position, and you're really kind of rolling the dice. But it's a passing league. But the quality of guys coming out, Bruce, it's off the shelf. and the number is over 5.5 wide receivers, and the over is the favorite minus $1.70. 5.5 wideouts in the first round.
Yeah, my early scoping has it at 6, so I could see that, maybe even getting over. But yeah, there's going to be some guys, and that's sort of been the shift here. We've seen wide receivers be more premium on them in recent years. The Alabama guys, Judy and Ruggs, Judy might be the first receiver taken overall, unless it's C.D. Lamb out of Oklahoma. And these guys are probably, I've seen Lamb in there in the top 10 for sure, and Judy in some projections in there as well. Chenault out of Colorado, Ayuk out of Arizona State, Hamler, Penn State coming out early. Then you got guys like T. Higgins from Clemson and Jefferson out of LSU and others. So yeah, this looks like it's going to be kind of the buzz, and it's been that way for a couple of drafts. It seems like where there's going to be a lot of receivers going. It's certainly a shift, isn't it, Brian? In years past,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it was running backs that were there, and it might be again just a function of what's coming out. But this is happening more often than not in recent years. Just kind of a shift in the way the game is played now. In receivers, there's more receivers on the field too. A lot of teams are just playing one running back, 3 or 4 wideouts. So yeah, sure, there's more positions to fill. Receiver.
Well, I'm thrilled. That's why we love you, Bruce. I'm thrilled you mentioned him because I've got a funny feeling the kid's going to drop through no fault of his own. If you went back 4 months, the Chenault kid from Colorado, many people had him going. I think in most mock drafts, people actually had him going to Buffalo with the 22nd pick. Well, the Bills made the trade and got Stephon Diggs. Which is, by the way, which really I do believe impacts this number specifically because there was no doubt the Bills were taking a wide receiver in the first round, and they're not there anymore. So that has an impact on this particular number we're talking about. But I think, what did he have, Bruce? I think it was like one of those core surgery things.
Yes.
I think he's going to be perfectly fine, but because of the injury, this kid, I believe, is going to drop, and someone is going to have a terrific player just fall smack dab in their lap.
Yeah. Now, the
for outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com.
You can line him up everywhere. You could line this guy up at a running back. He can run over defensive backs, too, and he's a powerful runner, and he's big, and he can catch. And I don't know that he was in a great offense there at Colorado either. You put him on the right team and you keep him healthy this year, and he doesn't have any recurrence of these things. He's a possible rookie of the year in the right situation because the things he can do. He personally put Colorado on the map the first month and a half of the 2018 season, and it wasn't until he got hurt and he slowed down, that Colorado's whole operation sort of slowed down, and that ended up getting Mike McIntyre fired. But when Chenault was good, he was as impressive as any weapon in the country the past 2 years. So yes, I quite agree. He could be a very, very good pick for somebody wherever he goes. Most projections have him in the last half of the first round. Some slide into the second. I think he would be a guy by me. I would expect him to go somewhere middle, late first round.
And on an annual basis. And I know there are those that do like to debate this, and we talk about the polls in college football and are there biases, but to blanket, just broad brush it, the SEC is the best league in college football. Well, the quality of the teams is different than individuals, but generally speaking, let's cut to the chase. The SEC is really good, but there's no cutting around this one. And the number projected of total players from the SEC drafted in the first round, it's insane. And over 15.5 is the favorite minus $1.40.
Yeah, and I'm counting up right now what I've got in my 10, 11. I'm at 12. I'm at 13, 14. I'm at 15, 16, 17. I'm at 18 in my projection. So there you go. But a lot of them, this is Alabama, LSU, are way more than half of those, about 2/3 of those, if not a little bit more.
Bama's projected 5.5 guys in the first round, 5.5 under $1.50. And Auburn is 1.5. Now, I was looking for LSU. LSU over 5.5. And the under 5.5 is the favorite, minus 260 there.
Yeah, I got Alabama at 6 and LSU at 5 for whatever that's worth in my mock. And but this all changes. Now, Auburn's the interesting one. They've got a couple of those defensive linemen who figure to go good. Derek Brown might be the first defensive lineman taken. The tackle, Davidson, the defensive end, is figures somewhere in the middle to later first round. So I think Auburn might go up, but you might go beyond that 1.5. But you've got, a couple of others. South Carolina's got their defensive lineman, Kinlaw. If it's not Derek Brown, the first defensive lineman pick, it might be Kinlaw. Interior lineman, Chase Young's going to be the first lineman pick, though he's an end. Some people see him, linebacker, Jadeveon Clowney sort of player. But interior lineman, Kinlaw certainly, or Brown might be the first two.
These are fun to dissect, Bruce, but the one thing that has always happened, hell, you could even go back to last year. The guy was a first-round player, but Mayock goes off the board, takes the defensive end from Cleveland all the way up to the top. People are like, what? What was that? And then you go back to the Al Davis days, a wide receiver from Maryland that he could have gotten the third round. He took high in the first round. Arizona used to be famous for that. You had that era where Detroit just kept drafting a wide receiver in the first round, seemed like for a decade in a row. So everybody at the time can say crazy, and time will be the ultimate judge. But and you mentioned Daniel Jones last year. One off-the-wall move by one person, it just doesn't derail that spot. All of a sudden, guys are falling into spots where in a million years, a GM thought that guy would never be available. So one crazy pick really impacts God knows how many.
Yeah, and this is where trades come in as well, and you get teams moving up to get a guy they really value. The one player, the X-factor player I see as that being this year perhaps is Tua out of Alabama. I mean, if some team really wants him.
There are many discussions of him.
Yep.
The Bengals, all the way to the top, but clearly jumping up. Well, the Chase Young number is over under 2.5 because he's a gut cinch to go 2 unless someone throws the moon, for the number 2 pick.
And we've heard a lot of different wild rumors about who might be interested in Tua. Would Belichick make a big deal? Would he move up? There? Would there's not even a guarantee the Redskins go Chase Young at 2. I mean, Ron Rivera might decide, you know what, I don't think Haskins is my guy. I'd rather have Tua. So it's in a lot of teams right now, the most projections would have him not falling below 5. At the moment, that's where Miami is picking. And Miami is going to take a quarterback almost assuredly here. So, but the thing about the Dolphins are looking around like, we have to move up to take him. To preclude anybody else from jumping ahead of us here. So I think right now at the top of the first round, Tagovailoa could really have an impact on what other teams do. But it'll probably, that'll be the trade stuff usually happens, get closer to the draft. And that's one I'd be watching very close.
I think it's fair. I mean, there are two sides to a coin, and he is this polarizing guy, this hot commodity, and whoa, my God, people are going to trade up to get him. I'm telling you, you know what nobody talks about, Bruce? And I think it's a realistic thing, is that many of these people, because if you miss on a top 5 pick, you set a franchise back 5 years. I mean, if you're picking up there, you better not miss. And I can see some general managers sitting there going, man, A, how good is he as a pro? But B, the injury, I'm sketchy on this. No one talks about, could he be like, it's unfair comparison talent-wise, but could he be Brady Quinn? You know what I mean? Could he just drop off the map and everybody just sitting there and pick 20 going, hey, Tua, nobody's taking Tua. And, in the past, he'd be the poor guy stuck in the green room, but it's not going to be like that this year. But no one talks about, could he fall off the map?
That's possible, although I think for him it's probably the other way. But certainly a lot of we've seen this happen in the past in the draft. But I think that the quarterback thing, though, is it's not as black and white as a lot of these draft analysts talk about. Last year, for example, last season, 2019 season, by midway in the year, I mean, there were 3 rookie quarterbacks starting in the league. One of them was Jones because he had knocked Eli out by late September. Jones was in there for the Giants. The other 2, I mean, nobody on earth would have thought on draft day that these 2 guys would be starting. One was Minshew at Jacksonville out of Washington State, who was a late round pick. The other was Duck Hodges. Circumstance obviously put him in there in Pittsburgh. All the quarterbacks started getting hurt, but here's a free agent rookie out of Samford in Birmingham, ends up as a starter by midseason last year. So this stuff changes a lot, and sometimes the quarterback, more than any position, I think it's so it's such hit and miss by the analysts here on this, and the guys who work and the guys who don't. But the other thing is a lot of these rookies do end up playing a lot the first year. And if you, by the end of last season, I mean, some of the other, Haskins got in there, Drew Lock got in there, and he was a second-round pick, and there were some others. So the quarterback situation it's still the most intriguing.
Of course. And I would say this is a safe bet. That say it was over under 4.5. Say 5 of them are taken. A safe bet is 2 of them will be complete busts or just ordinary. That's just the nature of the beast. And lest we never forget, and I still say this, and people laugh at it, but I believe this with every fiber of my being. Tom Brady was drafted in the 6th round, and Mo Lewis not hit Drew Bledsoe, and Bledsoe remained the quarterback with the Patriots. Say that had gone on for another 1.5 years, 2 years, and Tom Brady's the backup. There's nothing that doesn't say the Patriots in 2 years went out and drafted a quarterback in the 1st or 2nd round, and Tom Brady may have never seen the light of day on a football field. And you could say that's stupid. And I'm like, it ain't stupid. I mean, opportunity presented itself. He did what he did. But there's a realistic possibility that opportunity may have never presented itself.
Yeah, and we've seen the first. Look, Aaron Rodgers kept dropping that year of his draft, way back to the big quarterback draft of the '83 draft, and Dan Marino. All those guys went ahead of him. He went right at the end of the 1st round because his senior season at Pitt turned into a big disappointment because Foch Fazio took over for Sherrill, changed the offense, and Marino didn't shine as much. But Miami got the break of all breaks. There he was sitting. This is a team that was in the Super Bowl and ended up getting Marino as their 1st-round pick right at the end of the 1st round that draft, and immediately he stepped right in. So yeah, listen. There are so many examples of teams messing up the quarterback situation in the draft. We could write a whole book just about that.
Well, you were one guy, and we'll wrap it up with this, but I remember, and he was another guy, and the jury remains out on just how good he ends up being. But you were one of the guys heading into the draft, Josh Allen, and it was like people loved him or people hated him. But the one thing you were very quick to point out throughout the course of that process was, well, his junior year was a lot better than his senior year, but that was nothing more than a function of, he had good wide receivers in his junior year, and he still has shortcomings, but athletic, nothing changed other than the players that he was working with in his senior year at Wyoming. And then it was like, who's going to take the leap of faith that it's his junior year is what we should be looking at.
Yeah, that's sort of like a Marino a bit. And then the other thing about Allen, what I always liked about him, anybody who watched Wyoming as much as I did, and knowing the offense they ran up there, it was not exactly designed to highlight a quarterback. And if Allen could stick out in an offense like that and actually look pretty good running that old-fashioned offense Craig Bull uses up at Wyoming, my goodness, if we get into the NFL, what could he do? So, I think that's worked out pretty well for Allen. We'll see this year. He'll have a chance to really step up. He's got some more weapons, but I always liked him because I saw through what was going on at Wyoming, and he was.
Very much. Yeah. The point is, you have to be, and general managers, and hey, listen, a fish rots from the head down. Some guys know how to do it. Some guys are just a disaster doing it. But what you're saying is, you got to trust your scouts. You got to trust your eyeballs. but you also have to be willing to read between the lines.
Yeah, and there's the guy. I mean, here, Paxton Lynch. I mean, I poke fun at what Elway's done in Denver, but he deserves it. And that's an example of a guy who became a first-round pick who, they didn't read between the lines with this guy. And his career. But the history of Ryan Leaf, I mean, we could go on forever about guys who didn't cut it. But the quarterbacks, it's always more magnified with those guys, and that's why they're always so interesting.
All right, I promise we're going to wrap it up here. But wait, the guys that get it right are football guys. And honestly, you bring up Ryan Leaf, and that always falls through the cracks, and I laugh at that. But Bill Polian built the Bills team that went to 4 Super Bowls. Then he goes to Carolina, and he gets Carolina to the Super Bowl. Then he goes to Indianapolis, and believe me, at the time, it was absolutely a coin flip, and there were people with conviction that said Ryan Leaf is better than Peyton Manning.
Yes. Bill
Polian chose wisely.
Yes, he certainly did. He certainly did. And that's one of the glaring examples. But there's a lot of those over the years. That's why a quarterback's always intrigued.
He's Bruce Marshall from The Gold Sheet. I'm Brian Blessing. We're in Las Vegas, and we're excited. And we've just scratched the surface. And it's stuff you can bet on, the NFL Draft.
Let's make some money tonight.
Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com, and reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At betmaker.com and the Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.